Welcome back to the Nourish and Free podcast, where we take time to create conversations around body image, disordered eating, and how to create a healthy relationship with food and ourselves. I'm your host, Michelle Yates, a registered dietitian who has been through my own battle with body dysmorphia and an eating disorder. Today, I am joined by the lovely Maria Tornberg, owner and photographer at Tornberg Headshots. She's a writer, formal model, photographer, obviously, and actress. You may recognize her from her roles in Super Troopers, General Hospital, or Two and a Half Men. Maria helps actors create headshots and fine tune their branding as their career consultant, guiding them towards finding the right representation. Maria is going to blow your mind with her stories from starting out in Paris as a 15-year-old model to acting in Hollywood and her near-death experience 7 years ago after a home invasion. You're going to fall in love with her just like I did. If you're new to the show, be sure you hit the follow or subscribe button so that you never miss a future episode. And if you love this episode or others, please let me know with a rating or review. Let's dive in with Maria, and we're kicking off with a conversation that I had started right before we pressed record. Okay, so I just asked you a question and I want to know the answer to it.
Okay.
What is it
Wait, what
like?
was it again?
So you just told me that you were on Super Troopers and people still recognize you for that, which was 20 years ago. So what is it like to still be recognized for something that was 20 years ago?
I used to be really embarrassed to be, oh, I don't, no, I'm not about the film, not about the film, because I owe a lot to this film and the filmmakers, but just, just feeling like, yeah, just feeling a bit embarrassed about it.
Mm.
But I'm surprised that I'm recognized. I'm like,
You must not have aged, which is a compliment, you know? It's like, oh, you recognize me? Oh.
yeah, it's like, tell me more. Now it's like, I think as you get older and, you just start to kind of look at things in a different way. I mean, I am anyway. I'm just, I'm just grateful.
Yeah.
I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity to do that. And, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so.
I love it. And you were just something that you said, I don't you probably didn't even notice this, but something that you said a minute ago was that you've been acting on and off and you're having fun with it. And
Mhm.
I don't feel like that's something that I hear a lot from people in the industry because I mean, from what I've heard, it's a pretty rough industry.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard because there's a lot of rejection, and it's not really a natural kind of a competition because if you're, let's say, a sprinter, you know that the work you're going to put in, you're going to see the results. If you're lifting the weight, you're going to start seeing the muscle building. But in this profession, it's like you can do all the work and still not see anything. And it's
Mm,
I can really, you see people just dropping off all the time. I've been here for 20 years, as I said, but
hmm
so many people are leaving or have left, and it's really hard to stay. And for me, it was I couldn't need it because you're putting
mm,
yourself in a situation where you are putting your life in other people's hands to either accept, to say yes or no. And that's a very vulnerable position to be in. And so I didn't want to be in that position to feel like, I needed these people. And that's also how we're probably going to touch on later, but like how I stayed away from actually a lot of the predators because
mm,
I mean, I didn't stay away from them. Believe me, I met them all and I interacted
mm,
with most of them that are in the news today. But
mm,
I just never came from a place of, I don't feel I need anyone for my career. I mean, obviously they could have, attacked me, but I think that it helped me as in I know that I can do it myself. And if even if it's not the magnitude that I wanted my career to be, I would still be able to be an actor and have
hmm
fun with it, right? So
Yeah.
um, and then I wanted to focus on my photography as my business, as a steady stability and solid ground to stand on, so that I could have fun being an actress and not depend on that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm sure that's where a lot of the stress does come is
Yeah.
like when you're depending on it for your livelihood, but yet it's so inconsistent.
I want to correct a little bit because I kind of feel like the way I expressed that was almost like, well, the reason why I didn't, get in trouble with the predators is because I was, and other women who were,
Mm,
um, that's not at all what I meant. I think I did get, I was in a lot of those situations, and which
Yeah.
have been very harmful. But I think that the reason why I always had that mentality of that I didn't need that
Mhm.
situation. And I think that when you come from that standpoint and you just have that philosophy, it keeps you safer.
Yeah. I definitely see what you mean because I think you're more in the position of like being ready to say no at any moment. But if that's somebody's livelihood, they're more prone to say yes to things, right? And so that could maybe
Yeah,
make
but
you
also
more.
I think being more vulnerable, even if you don't say yes, but it's just you are in a
Mhm.
more vulnerable position. It's
True.
easier to manipulate someone who's in need, right? Than
Yeah.
someone who feels like, what, even if I don't, if this is never going to happen, it's okay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us about, so you were born in Sweden and then
Yes.
moved to Paris when you were 15. And was that the start of your modeling career?
Yes, it was. Before then, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Sweden, and I think I was born to do what I do as an artist. As soon as I knew how to write, I started writing. I was very shy, and I think a lot of kids are, but I was very shy, and I communicated a lot through my writings, and I love ballet, and I did, I danced and performance art. I never acted though. I never actually used my voice because I was so shy. So I never really sang or used my voice a lot. I didn't feel comfortable like talking in front of people on stage, but any kind of other expression of art, I loved. And I had a mother who really, pushed for, beauty standards and pushed me in that direction of modeling. So she took some photos of me and she sent it into a magazine, and it was the model of the year, a fashion magazine in Sweden, that every year there was a competition and you would vote, and then there would be a winner, and then that winner would go to Paris and then be a supermodel, right? So
Hmm.
so that's what we thought that was. And my mother sent in the photos, and I was selected to be a finalist, and I went to Stockholm. And before I went to Stockholm, I had a very severe acne as a teenager,
Hmm.
and we thought I should lose a little bit of weight. So I did a 5-day fast. I dropped weight like crazy that week before, and then my mother came with me to Stockholm, and I was skinny, and my acne had cleared a bit, and I became one of the finalists. And I didn't win the competition, but I got a letter with a contract to go to Paris over the summer. So I went to Paris that summer for a little bit more than a month. And of course, coming from Sweden, going straight into that world, it was like the gates just opened to this uh, insane world, right? Of
Hmm.
nightclubs and fashion and rock stars and supermodels. And so it was, it was a great time. And my life completely changed, obviously. There's no return from that.
Yeah.
Cannot just go back. And so I did go back, and which I was supposed to start school, high school. And after a week, I decided I have to go back.
Hmm.
And it wasn't about the modeling, it was about just the life, the idea of Paris, and sitting there at a cafe and writing poetry and going to museums, and you know and also for me it was really about, because I think at the core of everything, I'm a writer, it was to always like, I always had this idea that I wanted to go out in the world and just experience all these amazing stories that I saw in the movies, and live like, not like the movie stars, but like the characters in the movies, right?
Hmm.
And so I would have these great stories to tell eventually, and be able to write about. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I was really skinny when I was there that summer. And then when I finally convinced my mom to return, I had gained some weight, and I came back and I was told the first thing I was told when I got into the agency, now, the friends that I had met there over the summer had left, and I didn't know anybody anymore, and it was cold, and it was a different time now, and so I was told, the first thing I was told was to lose weight, and I had to lose about, I think it was about 5, 6 kilos, which I don't know in pounds. I still don't know.
I think
I
it's
think
10 to
like
12, or
okay,
it'd be like 12 to 15.
yeah, that's a lot. It sounds like a lot, but and then so that was the beginning, and I remember walking away from the agency and the anxiety that I felt, and I felt so alone, and I was really scared because I realized maybe I made a mistake. I left my friends back home, I left my family, and the good friends that I made over the summer, they were no longer there.
Mm.
And they put me in an apartment on my own, and they put me in an apartment called Rue de Boulangerie, which means the bakery street.
Mm-hmm.
So next door to my apartment was a bakery.
Mm-hmm.
In France, you can imagine, like, just the croissants and the baguettes.
Yes, that smelled so amazing, I bet.
It reminded me of family, right? And home. And so
And yet you were supposed to lose
yeah, and I remember I
weight.
went to this sort of outdoor mall called Leal, and I was just like walking around there, and there are all these scents coming from everywhere, and then I saw this big white chocolate cake, and I just craved it, and I was like, I can't eat it, and I remember that impulse of that kind of panicking setting in, and like feeling like tunnel vision,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing, like, my whole body going, no, alarm, alarm, this is bad, you can't do this. And I was like, I can't even take the time to make the decision because I just have to have it. And I
Mm.
remember just buying it, and I literally just ate the whole thing, and then I panicked over that because I'm like, how am I going to lose weight now? And I ran into the public bathroom, and I tried to throw up,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried for like 20 minutes, and I couldn't do it. And I remember just that feeling of sitting there, and the shame, and my bloodshot eyes, and I'm like, what am I doing? And
Yeah.
what's happening to me?
Yeah. How old were you at this point?
15.
Okay. On your own in Paris, just booked was it a month-long contract, right?
Yeah,
And
that was over the summer. And now I was actually going to start my career for
I see.
real. Yeah.
Got it. And you were told to lose weight, but yet you've got all of these scents from the boulangerie and you just want to eat. And that insatiable, like, I think that the tunnel vision you're describing is what a lot of people will really resonate with. And I know I've experienced at one point where it's just, it feels almost like out of body,
Yeah.
like this, it's like a storm in your mind and you can't think quick enough to stop the action.
Right. Because you don't allow yourself to do it.
So tell me about modeling then. Well, how long were you in Paris for?
So I was in Paris when I returned. I was there only for a month because then they decided to send me to Barcelona. So at the time, they, as a model, you went from place to place, and so the agency would say you would have a mother agency, so they would always like benefit from wherever you worked all over the world, and then they would say, hey, there's an agency who wants to work with you in Barcelona, and
Hmm.
since you are more commercial looking, which is in other words fat,
Hmm.
the market in Paris at the time was very editorial, means that it was like super super skinny, not kind of like the commercial look at the time was like a little bit more curvy and just more kind of smiley, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the editorial was more fashion and really, really, really skinny. And so the Barcelona market was more commercial, and therefore I could go there and get work to build my portfolio and then use that to come back to Paris
Hmm.
and work. So so they sent me to Barcelona. I was there, and then from there, that agency sent me to an agency in Madrid, and then that agency sent me to a German agency, and after that, I returned to Paris, and I was there for a year before I finally left for good.
Wow. And then you came to LA?
No, and then I went back to Sweden, and I went full on. I did just kind of 180, just really focused on my writing, and I went to school for that, and I went to Russia on a workshop, and I was working different kinds of jobs in Sweden for some years, and I had a relationship there, and then finally I just decided that I got an opportunity to work again as a model in Germany, and I was like, okay, I need the money, so I left, and I went to Germany, and then from Germany I went back to Barcelona. I was there for 2 years, and then I finally decided I need to go for what I really want to do, and I went to New York. I
Hmm.
went there to study drama at the Lee Strasberg Institute, and within a month I knew that this was it. I wanted to do this. But the thing was that, then I got into acting, and I got the role in Super Troopers, and then eventually I moved to Los Angeles. But a lot of the auditions that I would get were very it was the same kind of thing as in modeling. It was the sexy Swedish girl. It was the bikini girl. The
Mhm.
Adam Sandler movies, those kind of roles. And I just didn't feel like it was true to who I was, true to my brand, basically. And I was questioning everything and I felt a bit hopeless. So I decided to write my own stories, and I made my first short film,
Mhm.
Never Be Mine, and then eventually I made a second film, and then I started to think that maybe I could do more behind the camera, and I got a camera that has a really good video feature, and I started to shoot my own short films and videos, and I did a lot of still photography, and a lot of it was of my friends who were actors and models, and then they used those photos as their headshots. And I did a
Mhm.
lot of different photography in the beginning: advertisement, fashion, family photography. But the thing that I really loved was the one-on-one connection,
Right.
and especially when I started to realize that I could actually use all of my own experiences and everything that I'd gone through, and to just pour that into my job. But it took years before I felt like confident that I actually had something to offer and to give.
Right.
Um, so that is really my focus now, is to be that place, to be that person that I wish that I had, that I longed for, right?
Yeah.
And that I filled with this food disorder.
Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know what to call it really. I think it
Yeah.
is a disorder, right?
Depends. I mean,
I don't
there's a spectrum of, if you imagine like two ends of the spectrum, where one of the ends is an eating disorder and the other one is just normal healthy eating, intuitive eating even. And then in the middle of that whole spectrum is disordered eating, you know? So I think a lot of people fall in the disordered eating spectrum and maybe don't meet full criteria for a diagnosis, but that doesn't mean that they aren't struggling and that it's not
know.
stressful for them, you know? So yeah, I've found that like the labels don't really matter at the end of the
Right.
day. If you're
Yeah.
struggling, you're struggling, you know? um, so what was it like for you to be in an industry, specifically when you were young and in the modeling industry, to have your entire career based on how you look and to have how you look constantly critiqued?
I am so emotional right now. Like, I'm shaking, and it's
Mm.
it's not like, oh, it's a bad thing. I mean, it is scary for me right now, because I've never talked about this openly,
Mhm.
and I just decided that I'm ready, and I just jumped on this. But
I love it.
I'm just letting you know that I'm kind of trembling, and I'm having,
Yeah,
like, I
take
can
all the
hear my
time you
voice is like, ooh,
Yeah.
my mouth is getting dry. Um,
You're fine. Take all the time you need.
and I'm sweating. Like, whew. This is a lot, but I'm just gonna do it. It's the truth. I'm just gonna tell the truth.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wasn't even ready yet. Like I wasn't fully cooked, you know?
Mm. Yeah.
I was still growing. I was still
Yeah.
developing. I didn't really know who I was. I mean, I was coming into it, right? And then trying to figure out who you are, and at the same time having people telling you that you are wrong, that
Mm.
there's something wrong with you on a daily basis, all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of people along the way, in my life, eh, say, oh, if they give me a compliment about my looks, oh, but you know that, or you're a model, so. And the truth is that I think that it's complete the opposite, because you are
Mm.
always told what's wrong with you,
That's
and
interesting.
how you
Yeah.
are not okay, and how all these things, has to, you start feeling this shame, you
Mm-hmm.
know and you start to separate yourself from your body, because it is not yours anymore. It's
Mm.
for other people to judge and to decide whether or not you're accepted or not. I mean, I understand, obviously, if I'm a designer and I have a sample size and that's 6, and I need to have someone who can wear the size 6, right? But that's not what it was. It was about an ideal that had been decided and that we had to fulfill, right?
Right.
You're asking me what it was like. I think it was like as if, you would be standing somewhere on the street and people just could come up to you and point at you and say, look at her thighs, look at her cellulite, you need to lose
Mm.
weight, and we need to fix this. Um, and then, like, sometimes, like, the shock in people's eyes,
Mm.
um, just, you just start to feel like you start to internalize it, that I'm a bad person. I'm not
Mm.
okay. I, you know, I, I'm not okay but that also goes back to how you are raised, right? How it is in your family, because my mother gave me praise when I was thin. My mother gave me praise when I was pretty in her eyes. So that was already inside of me.
Yeah.
That was already a fact. So that's why I believed them when they told me that something was wrong with me, because that's what I already been, led to believe.
Yeah. And it's just confirmation of that
Yeah,
belief. Yeah. Just
yeah,
reeling it in. I think what you said about this perception people have that models already know that they're pretty, like, oh, you're a model, and how it's actually the opposite is it's so interesting for me, being the person who's never modeled and assumes that about models, right? Like, I, I think you always have a friend in when you're young that has done like a random magazine and is now like the model, and, and everybody's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, she's a model
Who does
now.
she
But
think she is?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you just like assume that now she has all the confidence in the world. But I think it's really amazing that you're sharing your story and sharing that on the other side, what you're receiving is just constant berating for how you look and criticism and being told you're essentially not good enough. And who wants to feel that way?
Yeah, I remember the skinnier you were, the more praise you got, and the more you worked. So, the food automatically became an enemy in a real sense, as in, I wouldn't be able to work and survive if I gained.
Yeah, which is a very tricky belief to unravel.
Right.
Because it was, in a sense, very true. It's not like this made up rule that you had around food. It was actual reality. You needed to restrict in order to be small enough to get jobs. And
Yeah.
that's just the situation you were in. It's not something you made up. If you feel like your life is completely centered around food, I need you to know that there is hope and it doesn't have to be like this. The women I work with start their journey in a dark, lonely place, and they walk away feeling like they're able to live their life again. No more stressing about everything they eat or letting the scale decide how they're going to feel that day. If you're ready to put in the work and heal from the inside out, then visit my show notes to learn about how you can spend 4 months with me in my signature program, where you'll have a high-touch support system, a proven framework delivered through online modules, and a community of women who get it and are walking alongside of you so that you can truly become nourished and free. Visit my show notes for more info. Is the industry in Hollywood, when it's more picture focused, video, like, being in the acting industry, is it just as bad, the pressure to be skinny? And maybe it's, again, different than it was, but was it just as bad for you there versus being in a modeling industry?
As soon as I got completely away from modeling, then I started to not worry about it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was starting to just become, even though it was still a factor, it wasn't as bad and constant for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just so much better now, that from my perspective, what I went through and the way it is now, I don't have myself, I'm not feeling any pressure anymore as an actor.
That's good. Yeah. So how did you, I mean, you've got so much deep rooted emotional ties to how you feel about your weight, how you feel about food. And how do you get out of that? How do you get to a place of recovery?
I think it's ongoing. I think it's
Mhm.
always going to be there,
Yeah, well
because
said.
it is part of your personality in a way, right?
Yeah.
I went through something 7 years ago. In September, it's going to be 7 years. I became a victim of a crime. It was a home invasion. I ended up jumping out of the window, and I broke my back, both hands, and I shattered my feet.
Oh,
And I'm I was in a wheelchair for 4 months. I didn't know if I was going to walk again. The it was sort of like the pilgrimage of my life, right? It's before and after that event.
yeah.
So, throughout that process, I really had the opportunity I had no choice but to associate. As in, my whole life, I feel like I have disassociated
Yeah.
through a lot of trauma, and I literally was not in my body. And I think because of that, I became very vulnerable to a situation that was what it was. And I had to question myself and ask myself, how did I end up here? How
Mm.
did this happen and why? And I didn't have a choice, because I was flat on my back for 4 months. And I really came to the realization of how I had been rejecting myself, rejecting my own body,
Mm.
and been lying to myself. And that was sort of the process of where I started to realize I lost completely my identity, because my identity was this, tall person. I didn't understand what that impact is. Like, when you are really tall, for example, you walk into a room, until I was in a wheelchair and I was overseen, and I understood how much of my identity was tied to my body and to the way that I looked. And when that was completely shattered,
Mm-hmm.
I had to understand who I really was, right?
Yeah.
And that my body was my friend, because my body saved my life. If
Yeah.
I hadn't been as strong as I am, the way I fell, I would not be here today. And so I started to look at my body in a different way, as in, I thank my body for saving my life, and just starting a new relationship with it,
Yeah.
right?
That's really
and
cool.
and I was basically reborn, because I had to start to walk again. I had to start to learn how to walk again. And I'm so thankful for my body now. So,
Yeah.
not that you are not if you have an eating disorder. It's just it took that for me to just start to understand that I am safe because I trust myself. I can survive something so horrendous
Mm.
and I won't be starving.
Mm-hmm.
I lost almost everything, but I did save myself, right? And so I had to understand, like, where does it all come from? Well, it comes from the fact that I was alone as a child out in the world, and I wanted my parents, and food for me became my nurturing, my, you know, my comfort as it is, right? Comfort food.
Yeah.
And so I really started to change my perspective on it. And I love to cook, by the way. Food for me is so important. It's my love language. Uh, it's how I show people how much I care about them because
Yeah.
it's such a fundamental, beautiful thing. It means family, it means being together. And I think because I miss that so much, I miss the sense of family. I turned to food, right? Because that was
Yeah.
that thing that
Amazing.
you want, like this, that grounds you. But it's
Absolutely.
so much more than just nutrition and taste. It's a sense of comfort and
Yeah.
belonging.
Yeah. It's an emotional experience, and there's a lot of pleasure wrapped up in food. And um, I love what you said about you felt like your body was your friend and it had saved you. And the concept that you're talking about there of shifting from you feeling like it was your enemy or it was, your identity, I guess, to it being your friend and something that helped you is kind of along the lines of something that I do a lot with my clients, which is called body neutrality. And the concept of body neutrality is that you've got body positivity over here. We all know somebody on Instagram who's a body positive warrior, and that's great. And it's awesome that they can feel that way about themselves. But most of us just don't have the capacity to feel that way because we've been on the complete opposite side where we've just got body blaming and body hate, and we just detest ourselves, come up with every reason why it's wrong and ugly and isn't worthy. And so neutrality is this nice little bridge in the middle where you're not trying to be obsessed with your body and be in love with it, but you're not hating it either. You're just seeing it as what it is, which is like a body that was able to break your fall, quite literally, but also save you from death.
Yeah.
And it's a friend for you in that sense. And it does help you to pursue your passions in acting and photography and writing and all these things. It's a container for your soul and for you to be able to be a part of this world and create and experience and live. And that's beautiful in and of itself. That's something that we can feel really good about. And so that's like a lot of times much more attainable and much easier for women especially to get to than the body positivity side of things, where you're like, I love my cellulite, I love my rolls, and it's great if you can do that. It's just difficult, and even like some days you're going to feel that way, and some days you won't. So I think it's really cool that you had. Obviously, it's a terrible circumstance, and I'm so glad you survived. And I'm really like, I cannot believe you went through that, and it's horrible. Nobody should have to go through that. But it's amazing what you've made from it and what you've been able to do out of that experience. And yeah, I don't know. I'm a believer in God, and I feel like that was totally a God thing, just like using that tragedy to build you up from the ashes in such a cool
Amen.
way, you know?
Amen.
And
Amen.
now look at you. You're like this amazing warrior in your own way, talking about your story, and that's so impactful. So, what is your relationship with food like now, then, that you've come to a completely different place with your body? Because your relationship with your body was causing food to be your enemy. So now that your relationship with your body has changed, what kind of part does food play in your life now?
I do care a lot about how I look.
Hmm.
I have to admit that it's very important to me to have a body that I consider a healthy body, a body that I feel sexy in, right?
Hmm.
So I work out a lot. I do hot yoga and I go swimming, but a lot of that is my physical therapy. So I have to do that in order to be able to walk to, without too many, complications and things like that. And I do watch what I eat, as in I want to eat in a way that is yummy and healthy and you know, makes my body feel good, right? And
Yeah.
and I feel comforted. So, I mean, I think that my relationship with food is wonderful. I mean, I love food so much. I love to cook.
Same.
I'm like food is everything to me. Um, but in a good way, as in, I feel like I'm actually a Swedish woman trapped in Italian mama's body, because I always have like a tomato sauce on the stove, a curry on the stove. I'm always creating new recipes, and I do my cooking videos, and like I said, it's my love language. So it is it's a love relationship. It really is.
Hmm.
But the ticks and the thoughts always come in. It's like, maybe if you meet somebody new, you're kind of like, oh shit, do I have to lose weight before, we, and it's not even a thought. It's just a tick that I know,
Right. It's automatic.
and then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Why am I doing this to myself right now?
Yeah.
Like, I'm being my own perpetrator now. Someone was the perpetrator, and this is what happens. It's called trauma bond, right? You have a trauma bond with maybe a person or even with food. So it's not me.
Mm.
It's I'm just carrying on, re-traumatizing myself over and over again,
Mhm.
and so I just have to break it. And I think that's also like, the OCD, when it kind of like clicks into that, you just have to break it loose a little bit. I think that when I really understood that I was capable of surviving throughout that experience, not just like the fall, but also everything that came after and everything that I lost. And I was able to, even I couldn't be walking or even use my hands to take care of myself. And I was an infant. I was able to keep my home and to not starve to death.
Mm.
And that was thanks to a lot of people, mostly strangers, that donating to my GoFundMe, and I owe my life to them.
Mm.
And I realized that I'm going to be okay. And I think a lot of times the food was, the food disorder was in a way a fear of not surviving.
Yeah.
Um, Still today, when I get hungry, I get really scared. It's like a fear that sets into my body that I'm going to starve. Something bad is going to happen. So it is like it, but that's the abandonment. It's like you need your mom, you need your parents in a very crucial time of your life, and you have to turn to the thing, right, that gives you some sense of that.
Yeah.
That's what I have come to realize. It's a new realization for me, because I
Hmm.
never really thought of the source of it.
Hmm. Which is so important that you get to the root of all of
Yeah, so when I got to the root, and
things.
I realized that the feeling that I really had was a hollowness. It was a feeling of being hungry. I was feeling of starving for comfort,
Yeah.
right? It's here. It's the longing and the yearning and the sadness. It's right here. It's in your soul, where your stomach is. And
Hmm.
so when you feel that, you feel comforted and filled.
Right.
And then the guilt sits in, and it's almost like you're attacking yourself. But I think it's always going to be that in me. When I do have those thoughts, I get a little angry with myself, because I'm like, wait a minute, Maria, do you remember how your body healed? And I
Hmm.
remember one time when I was lying down and I had my feet up and my cast, and I could feel all these like little tingling inside of my bones. And I was like, what is that? And I had this idea that it was like these little men with little hats, some construction hats, and they were hammering and fixing and healing me. Because that's basically your cells are working overtime
Totally.
for you.
Yeah.
And so you're just laying there, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Body is like working nonstop to fix you. How dare I, or how dare anybody else have an opinion about my body,
Mm,
right? It's like you have to stand up for your body,
totally. Because it's amazing and it's
right?
working overtime all the time. And I was just
Yes.
thinking about this the other day, how our cells are continually dying and then like regrowing and multiplying. And it's crazy how all of that is happening and we have zero clue because it's just not on the top of mind. But what
Right.
is on the top of mind is how we don't look like that person that we wish we looked like, or that model that was actually super edited or whatever, or was starving herself in order to look that way or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's crazy.
The thing that I'm most concerned about is the surgeries and changing the idea of what a woman should look like, right? Because if you're looking at, models from the 90s, I mean, their bodies were natural, right? Even
Yeah,
though, they were skinny and modified that way, but just also like the shape of the woman's body, like it's not natural to have a body like the Kardashians, for example. Like that's not a female body
yeah,
form. It's not. It's
yeah,
made up. It's created, and that's what I think is really one of the things that's I find really scary, because that you cannot achieve.
right.
There's no way
Yeah,
you can do that.
it's completely and totally unnatural.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It is disheartening. So I feel like I've taken a lot of your time already and you've been so generous with your story. Is there anything else that you want to share that you feel like you wanted to mention today that would be helpful for you in your healing journey?
I think that, at the end, what I wanted to say is I was listening to one of the episodes where I can't remember her name, but she said, just going out for ice cream with your friend, right?
Yeah.
And that really hit home for me, because these last years that I have been on my healing journey, I realized that there's so many things I didn't allow myself to do
Mhm.
before. And a big part of that is food. Like, why didn't I ever just, when I was living in Hamburg, why didn't I just go out and have a big beer and try different beers? I'm in Hamburg. Why didn't I do that? And or like, what, when I was living in New York for 5 years, why didn't I just go and have pizza in Brooklyn? You
Mm,
know, that would was not a part of my accepted life.
yeah.
And so now, because I have had a near death experience, and I start to look at things from a different perspective as a newborn in a way,
Yeah.
I I find myself just going down the street and buying myself an ice cream on a Sunday. And I walk around with my ice cream cone and I'm like, this is so good. And I'm
So
like
good.
resisting my all that anxiety of like, oh my God, can I eat tomorrow? Can I eat tomorrow? Then maybe I shouldn't eat for 2 days now because of and then I have to do this. And what a shame. They're gonna look at me and they're gonna think, oh my God, look how fat, look at her butt, look at her butt. Those words and those voices are in my head.
Yeah.
But it is like when you meditate, you just have to just let them chatter and keep eating your ice cream and
Yeah.
life, because as we all know theoretically, but once something happens to you like that and you think you're going to die and you get a second chance, it just changes you. And so I just have tried to really just live my life and live it fully. If I want to eat that pizza, I'm going to have it. I'm not going to have it every day because I do not want to gain weight. I want to be the way that I want to be, right? So, but I'm not going to punish myself. I'm not going to do
Mhm.
it. If I go out to a restaurant, I'm going to eat what I want to eat on the menu. And I do it very intentionally. When I look at a menu and I would always go, the salad. We all know we go for the salad or the fish. And I'm like, what do I really want to eat?
Love that.
You know? And
Yeah.
that's the thing, like, I think that eating disorder for many people can be that abandoned child within who wants love and comfort and wants to be seen and heard. And once I started doing that for myself, and I said to myself, hey Maria, what do you want to eat? But what do you really want?
Mhm.
What do you really want to eat? Come on. And I'm like, I want the mashed potatoes and I want the cream corn and the big ribeye steak. That's what I want. Okay, you can have it. Really?
Love it.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm working on it on a daily basis. I'm having these conversations with me, and when that tick sets in, I just stop and I look at it. And I'm like, what is this? Right?
Yeah.
What's causing me that anxiety right now?
Yeah. It's that automatic thought that's just really, I mean, that's a neural pathway in your brain that has been walked so many times, and that strength or that connection is so strong in your brain to have those thoughts that it's automatic. So what you've been describing of like well, wait a second, why are we thinking that way, Maria? Like, do we really, can't I just have ice cream? It's the concept that I tell my clients a lot, where it's like you can't always choose your first thought, but you can choose the second thought. And the second
Yeah.
thought is where you can kind of question that first one and that automatic one and
I
challenge
think,
the chatter, you know?
yeah, and I think it's I think also a big part of the problem is that, when you have this problem, then you you shame yourself on top of it for having the problem. And then you get mad at yourself because you cannot be normal. Why can I not be normal? Why can I not figure this thing out? And so I think it's important that people understand that this is not something to be figured out, and not something to be figured out quickly. It's a journey, right? And the journey is really to discover the source of it, and um, understanding what it is that you really truly need and that you feel that you're lacking in your life,
Yeah.
right? So it's not something that, oh, if you just do this and that, then you're going to fix yourself, because there is no real, everyone is going through their own journey,
Hmm.
and as long as, and I think that you said something in one of the episodes, the awareness, which
Yeah.
is really everything, because once you have the awareness, you can separate yourself from it, right? And you can look at it as, oh, okay, this is interesting, this is happening,
Yeah.
and internalize it. I'm a bad person. I should be ashamed of myself for having these thoughts, and
Yeah. Yeah. That
behaviors.
awareness is huge because you can't make change without knowing like what is going on, what the heck is going on right now. So, yeah. Well, this was great, Maria. I commend you and your bravery, and I'm so glad you're here with us today because all things considered, that's pretty amazing considering what happened 7 years ago. So I appreciate
I'm
you.
sweating. I'm like, I'm I have to, I have to take a shower now. Thank you so much for listening for a long
Yeah.
time. And
You kidding? This was great. This was so good. I love stories and I love hearing because I think there's what you mentioned was that you felt like you couldn't really, you were ashamed and you couldn't really talk about it, right? Because it's like, I'm the only one that's going through this, right? Nobody else is struggling with this. But in reality, there's millions of other women struggling with this and men too.
yeah,
And it's so powerful to talk about it because then we start to have more and more conversations and normalize it. And then we can really heal. And
yeah,
the longer that you feel isolated and like you're alone, then the more you're stuck and you can't
yeah,
really move forward and there's no conversation around it. So just huge props to you for being vocal about what's going on and having those conversations because it's not easy to say how imperfect you are and the struggles you've been through and even traumas that you've been through. But it is important for healing and you're crushing it.
Thank you so much. You're really wonderful, and there's something really special about the energy that you give out. It's very authentic. It just feels very comforting, like I said before, and also honest. And I love your approach to this food culture.
Mhm.
Um, what is that called again? It's up the anorexia, and then it's the or
Orthorexia. Yeah.
orthorexia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is very triggering for a lot of people, myself included. And I love that you shine light on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you must have been listening to that episode about like when your health obsession becomes unhealthy.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that story about getting ice cream with a friend, and that was what Katie had talked about on there. And so anybody that's interested in that episode, you'll have to go back and find that's just a couple episodes ago. I can't remember the date exactly, but I'll put it in the show notes. But
Yeah.
it's a good one if you're struggling
Very
with
good one.
yeah, like feeling stressed around the ingredients in your food or just types of food, like having whole grain pasta versus regular pasta. Like that can be super triggering, not necessarily just eating in general, but just eating certain things can be very triggering. So if that's something you identify with, that's a good episode to listen to. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it, Maria.
I really did.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I cannot wait for this episode to come out and for all the feedback. It's going to be amazing.
I'm nervous, but I'm excited.
You don't need to be.
Thank you so much. It was oh, and also I have to kind of plug Tornberg Headshots
Yes.
is my company.
Yes,
So
I'm so glad you said that. So you are a photographer for headshots, and
yes, yes.
so people can find you at your website, correct?
Yes, it's tornbergheadshots.com and also on Instagram, Tornberg Headshots, Tornberg.
Great. And that's for actors and actresses, correct?
Yes, so I
Or
focus on helping actors with their personal brands and their careers. I create their headshots, and I also help them find the right representation.
which is important, as
Yes,
you've even just discussed earlier
exactly,
with your own representation. It's
exactly.
important.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. So any actors or actresses listening to this, needing some headshots or representation, brand help, Maria's your gal. I mean, what a better person to represent or help you with finding representation than Maria, for real. I love it.